Good. We were just talking about Zorro, and I did the first one, and it was really the first big film that I had done, and it was such a wonderful experience because it's like moving 200 people. We shot in Mexico for 4 months, and it was really, really sort of incredible. For so many reasons, you know, as a student, I went to school in Philadelphia, but I grew up in New Haven, so I'd take the train back to visit my folks, and I'd stop in New York and see a play. And I stopped one time and I saw Equus with Anthony Hopkins. And to catch the train, you know, I had a little bit of time, so I had a cup of coffee and a cafe close to the theater, a little luncheonette. And who walks in a half hour later? Anthony Hopkins. So, and I'm leaving, and I say, oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, you know, but I have to say that was just amazing. And I turn and leave, and he goes, wait. And we just chatted for 5 minutes. That's all, at the most 5 minutes. Where do you study? What are you doing? And then you cut, just, you know, 15 years later, and you're doing a film with him. And it was so nice, you know. I don't mean to give the wrong impression. These are not our friends. You know, there's a hierarchy the way there is in any part. But he was so generous. And but the story I was going to tell you is I had done the first one, and I was doing a lot of films back when the Sci-Fi Channel would do films in Bulgaria, in winter, which is amazing. It's, on one hand, you know, to go up to some of the monasteries that, you know, Bulgaria was occupied by the Turks for 500 years. So a lot of the Christian monasteries, Orthodox, are in the mountains with fortresses. So we'd go up there, and it was fabulous. But, you know, and I heard they were doing the second movie. So I wrote the director a note. I said, look, you know, I hear you're doing the second movie. I've been working in Bulgaria. I've really been freezing my off. And if there's anything, just let me know. I'd love to come and join you. And I didn't think anything of it. You know, you do, it's what's called administration. You write the letter and then you let it go. Just seeing maybe something will stick. And sure enough, a month later, I got a script. And there was hardly anything in the script. And I thought, well, and I thought, you know what? Fine, this is the director. I like the director. I like Mexico. I go. I was down there for 2.5 months. He wrote me into all scenes. And there's a scene in the second one. I love the first one, and I think the first one is a better film. But there is a scene in the second one where you have the son of Zorro, who's a student. Now, I had played the Don, so in this one, we decided I was, you know, when a family had more than one male child, one went inherited, one went in the military, and one became a priest. You know, that's the way it worked out. And so I was Don Luis's brother, his younger brother. So, but there's a scene with Zorro, because it's 10, 15 years later, he's got a little son, about 7 years old. And I'm his teacher, and of course he's impossible. So we have a fight in the classroom with a pointer and a ruler. And it's everything you've seen with Zorro. He's flipping, he's doing, it is one of, you know, it was so wonderful. And we worked really, it was 2 days just to shoot that scene. And the director was so excited. He says, you have to go to the rushes. You have to go see. And sure enough, it was a really, really wonderful scene, because you got this little kid, you know, we're doing all this fighting. And I had to be very careful, you know, of course, because you don't want to hurt him. He's at eye level, you know, with my pointer. So, but he was, you know, occasionally he hit my hand and I hit his hand. But he was really good. Anyway, that's how I got to do the second Zorro. If I hadn't said anything, as a matter of fact, the guy who owned the rights to Zorro was there and for the second one. And when he said, what are you doing here? I said, well, Martin Campbell hired me. That's what I'm doing. He says, well, if I'd known about it, I wouldn't have hired you. And I'm saying, you wouldn't, why? You know, what are you talking about? They put a little hairpiece on me. It's a completely different deal. You know, no one has ever said, by the way, oh, why weren't you in the first one? No one's ever even. So it's interesting. Anybody got any questions, or what was the plan? Someone's going to interview me? Is that, did I hear that, or no? Good. Well, then we'll just we'll just cut to the questions. Anything within reason, I'll be happy to answer.
I'm kind of curious. With you being on Once Upon a Time, what was it like to work with Lana? What is she like in real life?
Lana's a New Yorker, you know, she's from back east. So Lana has got she's a tough one. She can't be, but she's got a big, big heart, and
Okay.
she was lovely. And I remember, also Lana wasn't Lana. You know, and what I mean is she didn't have the success
That's
she has
true.
now. Same thing when in Mask of Zorro, it was Catherine Zeta-Jones. She wasn't Catherine. She hadn't won the Academy Award yet, you know. So it was a whole different thing. But no, Lana was great. Although, as I recall, I think she had to adapt a little bit to Vancouver. It's very different than New York. I was used to it because I grew up back east too. But I had been, you know, I followed to Oregon and Seattle and then San Francisco and eventually Los Angeles. So I was used to it, but I can understand the culture shock, you know.
Okay.
I remember when I came from New York, the first job I had was at a very good Shakespeare festival in Oregon called Oregon Shakespeare. It's in Ashland, Oregon. It's been there for 75 years, a really wonderful festival. I couldn't sleep the first night because there was a cow in the yard. I could sleep through sirens, I could sleep through the subway, I could sleep through anything, but this was a strange sound and my body was going, whoa, whoa, what is this?
See, that's lullabies to us here.
Yes, I'm thinking. But gradually I learned, you know, I learned to.
So I heard Richard Dean Anderson is notorious for ad-libbing lines. What's it like working with him? Like,
My image for Richard is, I was like, look at him. We blow up the balloon with all the sci-fi talk, all the, you know, all this jargon and everything. It's just, you know, sometimes it's hard even to memorize. You know, we blow it up, and Richard, I see him. He's figuring out a way to find a pin to just put it in. Because Richard is you. Richard, that's what's so wonderful. You know, the movie was much darker. It was Kurt Russell. You couldn't sustain that at that time in the series. Perhaps now maybe you could, but then, and so Richard, the hiring of Richard and Richard's take on the role was so great because he added levity, and his like, are you serious was your, are you serious? So it was great, and he could find the humor in anything. Occasionally it would be like, yeah, but we already have the joke set up. and unless you give the line as written, the joke doesn't work. But hey, it's his show, so he gets to decide. But thank God for him, you know, because he gave us 10 years, you know, even though he took a break for a couple of years. But yeah, who else? Yeah.
Was Curse of La Llorona always going to be a Conjuring movie? Do you know?
The Curse of Llorona, was it? We're talking about Annabelle and the Curse of La Llorona. It certainly, to me, is. You know, there's a big debate. Is it in that? All I know is I played a priest, and my parish is very active paranormally, because in 2 movies, you know, it's like they tend to come to this parish, and I had a great time doing that. And I didn't realize it. Growing up, I loved horror films. And then I did the theater. I didn't do anything for 15 years or so except theater and, you know, classical work in theater. And then I went to Los Angeles. I got into sci-fi, in part because my friends were doing sci-fi. Not because I had seen the original Star Wars on its, you know, when it opened, Alien, all the classic ones, Close Encounters, and I enjoyed them. But I wasn't like, you know, really following it in a very passionate way. But then when I came to LA, because my friends were working in Deep Space Nine or working in Next Generation, I would watch it. And then before you know it, I sort of got involved in that world with Stargate. So, very lucky. But what was your question specifically again?
Was Curse of La Llorona always going to be, like, were you always playing Father Perez in that? Or
Yes, I was playing Father Perez in that, the same priest. And it's funny, they didn't, you know, when they wrote it and they contacted me, at first I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is the same guy. And sure enough, yeah, and it was. And so my agent went back and said, hey, you got to pay him more. You know, Annabelle made a lot of money. Annabelle was quite a successful movie. It's amazing, you know, because it wasn't really that expensive to make. And to my mind, one of the best horror films, and when I say horror films, I mean psychologically horror, not blood and gore and let's see what we can see. Just psychological is The Conjuring. Acted, directed, incredible. We watched it, my wife and I, and Annabelle, because I did the press tour. So we had to go back and watch, and my wife she had to leave. It was just the two of us in the screening room to watch it. She just couldn't take it. It's a scary movie, and the actors, Patrick Wilson, I mean, they're really, really good actors. So, yeah. Who else? Yes.
What was your first episode of Stargate?
My first episode of Stargate, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can tell you it was in August of 1997, I can tell you specifically, because I don't remember the name of it, but it was, it's funny, no one's ever asked me that. I know my favorite episode is Threshold, but it's when I meet the group, I'm not sure. But it's interesting because when I arrived on set, you know, you read the script and you think, okay, just like in life, you have a family and you have, you know, people you're close. Who is the person that is most important in this world that they're creating? And obviously, the person is not Richard Dean Anderson. The person for me is Chris Judge, it's Tilk. So when I arrived on set, you know, it was sort of a faux pas. You know, they were doing a scene and Richard was sort of standing there, and I arrived and I knew who Richard was, but I'm looking for Chris, so I sort of walked right by Richard and went right to Chris. And he's like, and then our first interaction was very physical. You know, it was we immediately go at each other, and it worked really, really well, because when they hired me for that, it wasn't I knew I was going to come back for 26 episodes. It was, you know, they're testing chemistry. And with Chris, it was really interesting because sometimes actors will get together and they'll write stories and, you know, I was married to your sister and, or I took your girl, you know, to create something. I found Chris, he looked at me, I looked at him, and I knew it was going to be okay, because the reason we do that is we have to endow that other actor with certain qualities that create the chemistry that either makes us love them or hate them or anything. But it was no work with Chris. I don't know, don't ask me why. And I'll tell you one other thing, Chris never played a practical joke on me. He played a lot of practical, but not on me. It was almost like he didn't want to violate that sort of thing. No bad practical jokes, but I did do one thing to him that I love. And with Richard, it was just the opposite. Richard, we realized, oh, antagonism, this is great. And it makes sense, because all I care about is Tilk. And who are these other people? And oh my God, they were all great to me, because don't ask me why. When I arrived and I'm meeting them for the first time, when I met Michael Shanks, and this is not in the script, anything, I'm looking at him saying, these are the warriors? This is who's protecting the most important person in my life, the savior in a kind of way. Chris was was gonna come in and change everything. And when I got to Michael, Amanda, it was like, oh, and I get to Michael, and I don't ask me what possessed him. I bit his hand. I just bit him, it was so, and it also gave me a wonderful arc, because Braytak, by the end of the series, went from, a sort of grumpy warrior in a kind of way, to a politician, a diplomat, I don't want to say a diplomat. And that gave me a wonderful arc. But the dual thing of the antagonism with Richard and the love with Tilk gave them a lot to write. And then when I met Don Davis, it was even better, because Don was Hammond of Texas. That was fabulous. As a matter of fact, Carmen, Don, and I used to have what we would call geezer lunches. Because there'd be all these young guys rambunctious running around set. We'd sit down and have our lunch together, because I'd known Carmen for years, and Carmen. And when you go to Vancouver, sometimes they have families. They all have places when they're done, long days. But Carmen and I would be stuck, at the hotel. So we would often, have dinner and I'll tell you a funny story about Carmen. He's gone, but How can I put this? Carmen occasionally used to smoke marijuana. It's similar, occasionally. So one time they used to have these apartments, condos set for the actors. So I arrived, and then Carmen calls, "Hey, how you doing?" "That's great. We're gonna have dinner tonight." "Yeah, yeah." He said, "Do you mind if I come over?" I said, Sure. Come over. And he comes over and he's sort of hedging me, and we talk. "Carmen, what's up?" He said, Do you mind if I go into your kitchen?" Sure. He goes to the kitchen. He goes under the sink, reaches through the pipe, and pulls out like, I'm thinking, Carmen, what are you doing? It's about, everybody needs their own thing. But, anyway. Anybody else?
Care to expand on the practical jokes, more stories? Related?
Okay, I'll tell you the one I did on Chris. Chris, there were a lot of things like, I know for Alexis Cruz, he was in the sarcophagus, and they took lunch, and they just sort of left him. He didn't know that everyone was. It was an innocent practical joke. Wait a minute, it's awfully quiet out there. But the one I did to Chris that I love is I have a photo in snow that's out there, and it's the only time we shot in snow. And it's in that episode Threshold, which is our backstory. Interesting. You see for the first time when I meet again, and I'm looking at SG-1, you see so many different things. And we were shooting in the snow, and Chris comes up and says, "Hey, we're warriors shooting in the snow. We should do this bare chested." It's actually a good idea. It's sort of very Spartan. You're going to do it. It's a good idea. And then I'm hanging outside, thinking, God, it's awfully cold. So I knock on Chris's door. "Chris, it's a great idea, but to get the Abbot and Costello, meaning the teacher and the student, you should be the one bare-chested, because I'm training you." And he said, "Absolutely great." And you cut to 3 hours later, he's laying on what's called the snow blanket, and he's lying on and he's shivering. And I said, I forget, what did I say to him? Something to the effect of, youth has the energy, but age has the intelligence. But it's a great scene. And as a matter of fact, in that one, Peter DeLuise directed that episode. And this is the great thing about Stargate, there's fun in it. So I'm goading to, and he finally does challenge me, but I'm goading it because can I reveal what is really going on and why I want him up here, why he's special, or can't I? Because it's life and death for me. But so he challenges me, and so we're gonna have the master. Finally, the students gonna challenge the master, as they should do. And we're gonna. So I say to Peter DeLuise, "Peter, I got an idea. Just bear with me. See if you." He says, "Okay, go ahead." Yeah. Well, we come in and we do it very formally. So we got the staff. We're gonna fight, and Chris and I said, so we do it, very almost like Bushido, Except I got the staff, and as soon as Chris is bent, I give him a pop in the head, and it's just such a goofball sort of thing. But it just adds so much flavor, and because after a while, it gets old, and so yeah. Who else?
Did you get to keep any props?
I have some of the sort of
Some of the emblems?
the tattoos or everyone asked, how do they attach those? My pat response is nail gun. Yeah, I have some of those. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't have much, and as you know, they probably knew this going on. Someone bought it all, and it's in pieces now, and they're selling it as memorabilia. So much of it was bought. But I have a Zat gun. You acquire things a little bit, but yeah.
Can you talk about the changeling that you, like, in the fire department, I think?
Oh.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Written.
That episode was very, very good because, it's a dual reality. Related to that, I will tell you, and it's about Chris. It's very difficult. Actors, you're doing a series, and there's so many characters, whose story do you tell? And who, because there are A stories, B stories, there's who do you, and so Chris, being as creative as he is, he had a lot of ideas. And he'd go in, talk to the writer, producers. In television, the writer producers are really the most important thing. The director may have been hired an hour before the actor, but the writer producers have the long arc. So they are, versus film, where the director is key. He or she is the most important part, but not in television. So Chris would go into the writer producers and talk to them, and he'd go in often and with strong opinions. And finally they said, will you write it? Just write something. And well, he did. He wrote 5 or 6 episodes. And that was a wonderful thing for me. And he wrote Changeling, and that's, it's good. Dual reality, I don't know specifically what to talk about.
Well, I just thought it was interesting because they spent part of it was in, like, they were like firefighters.
Right, firefighters,
Right? Like,
complete
in
reality, yeah.
Right, which was,
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know what, or you probably, I think you were in the car where they were rescuing.
I was in the car where I was
They were
burned
rescuing
and-
you, so you weren't
yeah.
one of the firefighters.
No, I wasn't.
But I was just thinking of what it would be like to work in the fire station, it being on a sci-fi show
Right.
and stuff.
Oh,
like
well,
working with that.
there are firemen on set often, so it's not really that rare. And they brought in
You
the
just
trucks.
take over a fire station
Yeah,
for a
and
day.
no, absolutely. Firemen, retired policemen earn their second pension working on movie sets. Because by law, you have to have some of them. So consequently, that relationship is very good. And yes, everyone's comfortable. And Chris, got to show his stuff. Chris is very trim now, by the way. I don't know, it was the last time you saw Chris. He's doing God of War. Do you know that? He just won a big video game award for Best Actor in God of War. And he's very happy, so.
Do you keep in touch with other actors from Stargate?
Yeah, and that's why these conventions are so great. You know how you have friends that you meet at these conventions? Same thing, with us. Particularly the actors that live in Vancouver. Chris, I can see. Carmen, before he passed away, I could see. The people, Cliff, I used to see before he passed away. We're losing a lot of Stargate people, but Amanda and Tyrrell and David Nichol from Atlantis, that was, I don't get to see them so often except in conventions. And Michael Shanks, Ben Browder, he lives in LA, so. And LA has been going through a lot, as you know, in the last month. It's really impossible to comprehend it until you see it and but yeah, I try to stay in touch with everyone, birthdays and different things, and the conventions are great, particularly if they're out of the country, where we're at the same hotel, and we have a great time.
You talk about The Chosen?
The Chosen, yeah. The Chosen is a biblical series for the people that don't know it. One of the most popular series in the world right now. And I got a call to go and do this role. And I didn't know, frankly, I didn't know that much about it. I knew it was a biblical series, I read the script. Midlothian, Texas, the concrete capital of Texas. You gotta go, right? You gotta see it. So I went, and sure enough, it was a fabulous experience. This guy, Dallas Jenkins, who's probably a guy, I would say, in his early 40s, maybe. He's amazing. He truly is a writer-director. Big things in front of this guy. And it was just so well done. And I played John the Baptist's father, who he and his wife couldn't have a child. And he can't speak, actually. It was a wonderful experience, I have to say. We never know going in what it'll be. We never know, but I'm very proud of that series. And the sets, as soon as I arrived on set and I looked at where we were shooting, I thought, my God, this is so beautiful and so well done. It's just incredible. And the actors are great. I'm sorry I didn't have more to do, Mine was a flashback because it was done as a montage when John was ready to be killed. So they flashed back to his birth and his baptism. And it was quite.
There was another Stargate actor that's in The Chosen. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him.
Yes, Eric Avari. Eric Avari.
Mhm.
Yeah, Eric Avari, not only is another Stargate actor, he was in the movie
Yes.
Stargate. Eric Avari, yeah, I know, no, absolutely. He doesn't live in LA anymore, but I came across Eric many, many times. As you can imagine, we audition against each other because we have a similar sort of look. And no, Eric's a very, very good actor, and a little cranky sometimes. Eric gets cranky, and he got cranky on the Chosen. It's so funny because Dallas said, "Yeah," I said, "How'd you like working with Eric?" He said, "He's a fantastic actor. A little cranky sometimes." I said, "You think?" to quote Jack O'Neill, "You think?" No, but he's good. Eric Avari. There's so many. There's a big between Stargate, Once Upon a Time, and the Zorro films. There are a lot of people you have in common. As a matter of fact, IMDb, which is the Internet Media Database, so many times, when you say, who is that director? You realize, oh my God, I worked with them before. And, it just goes back. And then you start looking, okay, who's in this series? Oh, you did 3 episodes of something, 15 years ago with one of the actors. So it's a small world. Yeah. Anybody else? Hi.
Hi, sorry we're late.
I love your hat. No worries. No worries. No?
What does your process look like whenever you're preparing for a role?
If acting were science, it would be easy. In other words, if every single role required 3 ounces of this and 5 ounces of that and 6 ounces of effort and wait for 3 ounces of inspiration, it would be great, but they're all different. And for actors, you feel like you're always starting from the beginning. Because oddly, the more success you have, the more the higher the bar is for yourself. Right. So you become your own worst enemy. There's an old saying: don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Sometimes you're just good. You're not always going to be perfect. It's a matter of the role being right for you, being perfect for you, etc., etc. I look at a role many, many different ways. I look at it, what organ does this guy operate from? Obviously Geppetto and operates from the heart. For the people that saw Continuum, this is a guy who's all in his mind. I'm talking about the series Continuum, not Stargate. There's a series called Continuum. And the guy is a very, very ends justify the means. So it's all here. Braytak, it was all about courage and about honor. So you try to grab onto one of those things. And sometimes it's hard. I remember when I went up, I got the role. I had seen the movie Stargate, but the thing I was most excited about doing Stargate was going back to Vancouver. Because my wife and I had a honeymoon, and we took the train from Vancouver to Banff, the Rockies, and then we came back and spent 3 glorious days in Vancouver. And it always stayed with us. So when I got the audition, I said, well, if we get this, we get to go to Vancouver. I said, oh, well, that would be great, and everything like that. But that was the most exciting thing, and it's a world that changed my life. It had nothing to do, I know, because Stargate wasn't Stargate at the time. So, to me, I don't know, also the age, right? So the character is 133, so I get the role. And I'm thinking, oh boy, that means I'm going to be in a makeup chair at 4 o'clock. How am I going to enjoy Vancouver if I'm in a makeup chair at 4 o'clock and I finish work at 7 o'clock at night? And so I go in, and I found, this gets back to the original question, I found I had to do a fitting. So I go do my fitting, and you discover a lot in a fitting if the actor's open and the costume designer is receptive. Because who is this guy? I did the audition, but who is he? And in part, I think I got the role, because there are a lot of good actors, is because I was just coming off The Mask of Zorro. And it was a big film. And it was an MGM sort of thing too, so I think that didn't hurt. So I go in, and this woman, Christine, who was the we figure it out, and I'm looking at, so he's a medieval but stoic Roman samurai. Okay, okay, it all sort of makes sense in a kind of way. So I think, oh, thank God. So now I know at least a little bit more about what the direction is, because I know what I'm wearing, what I'm going to look like. So I'm going to leave, and I'm still in the back of my mind, 133 years old, prosthetics 3 hours, putting on 45 to an hour, taking off, and I'm getting in the car, and the assistant director says, oh, hold on, Jan Newman wants to see her. She's the makeup key. So I said, oh, okay. So I go in, I open the door to the trailer. I said, hi, Jan, I'm Tony, I'm playing Braytac. And she says, she looks at me, like really, really long. Oh, you're fine, she says. And now I'm insulted. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. But of course, I didn't know that, because that was part of my deal. I don't age in the way that everyone else has. So I was lucky. I got to enjoy Vancouver and got to do just one of the most important roles in my career. So who knew?
Out of all the roles you've played, which is the most like you in real life, do you think? Or how much of you is in each of your characters?
There's a little bit of each of my character. I would say I'm very, very Geppetto-like in many ways. I would say that.
Okay.
It's funny, for the longest time, because so much of acting, film and television acting, particularly in television, the rapidity of it, that you have the audition today, you might literally be shooting tomorrow. That has happened to me. They don't think, oh, well, there's a rehearsal process and we'll get the guy, we'll find the role. You need to be the role. And you don't walk in, they call them readings. They're not readings, they're actings. And so consequently, because of the way I look, I often played heavies, often played wackos, and that's fine. You need to understand that as an actor. So you go in, you look in the mirror, you say, how do people perceive me? And I learned that when I arrived in LA and I brought at the time you brought your resume around, now it's all digital, but you brought your resume around, and the roles I got, the roles they saw me for, off my picture, not knowing me, were heavies. And ethnic, which I frankly enjoyed. I love playing, Latinos, or Iranians, or Russians, that's great. That's great fun, I think. So consequently, you need to do that. But when you do that, you get those roles. Those are the roles you need to get. And gradually, the image is of a store where a guy or a gal has selling something to the public, but in the back, they're working on their dreams. In the back, so that when you attain success, they then ask you, well, what do you want to do? And you say, well, I want to do blank, blank, blank. And you're allowed a much wider range when that happens. So, getting to Once Upon a Time, gradually, all of a sudden, I'm playing the lovable grandfather. I was never playing the lovable grandfather before. Matter of fact, I hardly played fathers, because the notion of an American dad with the way I looked it didn't make sense. I sort of jumped to the grandfather, and then it made sense. I don't know, it's very interesting. Casting is a very interesting thing. And it leads me to one other thing that I tell students when I go in and talk to acting students, is that it's not a horse race. And because this is what happens, you're in a class, and you realize, oh my God, there are ingenues, there are young leading men, and there are character guys. I was a character guy. These young leading men and ingenues are going to get work before you are, normally, unless you're very lucky. But it's not a horse race. The first one through the finish line and gets a job is not the winner. And it's about longevity. It's about maintaining a career for 40 years. And often I find that the people that are perfect when they're young, and they just look so, I don't know, it's the epitome of youth, that when they age, they don't make sense anymore. It's all of a sudden you have an ingenue who becomes a grandmother. She still has that youthful thing. There's still something in her essence that's youthful that has served her very well at a certain age, but at this age, it doesn't serve her. So, or him. So it's very, very interesting to me to just have your own dreams, your own stuff. And for me, it was in the theater because I didn't go to LA until I was almost 40, and that was my road. Everybody's got a different road. Because I thought, I never dreamed of being a television film actor. I dreamed initially of being a theater actor, and I did it. I worked. Then you have to understand, I think about acting, and I say this too, is that normal people, they know two things about actors. Star, they get completely, and starving. That's what they understand. But there's like a whole mid-level of people that have homes, that work, have better years, worse years, but they carry on. They just carry on, and they create a life. And that's the group that I'm perhaps most proud to be a part of. And occasionally, one of those people, like, I don't know, people have watched The West Wing. Okay, I'm trying, what is his name? John, the guy who played the chief of staff. John. Oh, I can't believe, the Boston actor. Anyway, I worked with him on The West Wing the day after he won the Emmy. And Dennis Franz is another one. When Dennis Franz, had all that success in NYPD Blue and everything, the acting, regular actor community was just crazy. But John, he had picked up the Emmy the night before, and I shot with him all day the next day. Could not remember a word because he was so. All of a sudden, he's no longer John Spencer. He's no longer John Spencer, the actor, the working actor. He's John Spencer, the Emmy winner. And it was almost like, does that change anything? And it took him a while to realize, no, that's here, and now you come in. Because we always start from the beginning again. You always have to ask yourself the same questions. You always, pick yourself up and do the work. But anyway, I'm sort of rambling, sorry, but stream of consciousness. Anybody else?
I know I was disappointed when the kind of like the Sci-Fi Channel kind of collapsed as
Yeah.
a network, right? And then and this, like up there in Vancouver and stuff, it feels like there's not enough sci-fis coming down, trickling down our way anymore.
Yeah, and they're on Netflix, or they're on. But I have to say,
But I think in the good old days of Sci-Fi Channel, sci-fi.
Yeah, Must See Friday or whatever it was.
Yeah,
called.
Friday Night.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was fabulous. And when we did Stargate, the first 2 seasons, I believe, were on Showtime, and it did okay on Showtime. But boy, what a huge difference with the Sci-Fi Channel all of a sudden lifted, because it wouldn't have had 10 years of Showtime. No way. And the fact that all of a sudden there was a place for it, and there was a place for fans to go on Thursday or Friday or whatever, when they didn't have wrestling on. There was the wrestling.
The wrestling room.
There was the wrestling. But the Sci-Fi Channel, and I don't know why there isn't a
I don't know
more
why there's not a
dedicated.
dedicated channel to
There should be.
Sci-Fi Channel, just sci-fi.
I
in
couldn't
general.
agree with you more.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why that channel collapsed, because it
I
had been
don't
so
know.
popular.
I don't know. There must be a story behind it, but I don't know what it is. Yeah. Who else? Don't be shy. Yeah,
We
Richard.
talked some about doing stage work. What are some of your favorite roles from the stage that?
Oh, I was really, really lucky on the stage. First role I ever did on stage, I literally stumbled into an audition when I was in college. I didn't do any theater until I was in college, so I had a normal childhood. Normal, sports, not too much study, should have studied a lot more, but managed to, pass and continue on. Then I got to college, and I literally stumbled into this audition. And it was for The Tempest, William Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Wow.
And I played a mariner in that. It was at the beginning of the play, when there's a big storm and the ship is collapsing and everything. And my line, I think about it to this day because it's apropos for every actor. All is lost to prayers, all is lost. That was, that was the first line I ever said on stage. And, but the person who directed it had just retired from the Yale Drama School. She was the acting teacher there for like 40 years, Constance Welch. So, because it was the 60s, one guy was a a football player, you might know Dan Lauria, who was in the Wonder Years and different things. He was I understudied him. I was a freshman, he was a senior. So I understudied him because he was a football player and he could get injured. Another guy was politically active and would disappear, so I understudied him. So I got a tutorial every day at lunch, and I just followed through, and it became a social thing, and eventually a passion. But because of that, and because of the way I looked, getting back to that, Shakespeare was a natural thing for me. And because I'd done it, I never had a difference. It wasn't like, oh, Shakespeare is this, and like, no, it was the first thing I did. So the language didn't frighten me the way it does some people. So I've done maybe 27 of his plays. I've done Iago twice. I've done Merchant of Venice, Shylock. Matter of fact, I even finally did a Lear, which is really, it's hard to find a more challenging role of an 80-year-old that you really need to be no more than 60, 65 to do it, frankly. It's a really, really hard lift. But other things too. I'm trying to think what else. Mamet, Chekhov, Ibsen, Strindberg. Back then, I was in New York. I finished school, taught to get my nest egg, moved to New York, and then I was hired 2 months out to go to Oregon. So, and I realized how lucky I was, because most acting students, when they graduate, they've been studying Shakespeare and Ibsen and Chekhov and Moliere and all the great playwrights, and then someone hands them a copy of a commercial. Because now at least I think schools prepare actors for the commercial world as well as the classical world. Back then they didn't. So who knew? It took me, so my first job was in rep. What that means is we changed plays every night. Again, 2 Shakespeare's play, 1 Strindberg play. The next year, an American classic, Born Yesterday, a Machiavelli play, and an Ibsen play. Then the next year it was another Ibsen and a Shakespeare to get my union card finally. And in the process of doing that, I met a guy who was opening a new theater and said, when it's open, I want you to come. You have to commit to 5 years. And I just laughed. I thought, who would ask an actor? And he said, no, I'm serious. If you come to my theater, and I want you to stay. And if we don't like each other, there's a disagreement, we both can say, shake hands, go. I stayed 10. My wife stayed 13 years at this theater. So, because we were part of a company. And the notion of being part of a company is that one night you carry the play, you're the lead, and one night you carry the tray, you're the butler, But it creates a kind of dynamic where there aren't stars. There aren't, I don't do that. That there's a kind of, the best way I can describe it is 2 + 2 = 8 when you know each other on stage and you trust each other. So that was really, really valuable to me. And I still go back to do it when I can. I spent a couple of summers in Utah, 2010, 2015, doing Shakespeare, doing Shylock, and then doing Lear. But that world is changing. Those companies don't exist. There's a handful of places. When I was coming up, you could have a normal life. You weren't paid much, but you were paid enough. It wasn't, and you were so busy, because you're rehearsing during the day and performing at night. And the food is good at theaters, I have to say, because of the supporters who bring food to the poor starving actor. So they always brought us food. I don't know, it was a great life. And I feel, I'm really sort of disappointed that younger actors won't have that experience anymore. Because people will often ask you, why even do theater? Isn't it about 21st century? Isn't it about film and television? Why do theater? It's so old. And I say that's exactly why I do it. Because there's a direct line, let's say, from 2,300 years ago, with an actor on an opening night saying, how am I going to do this? To me on an opening night wondering, how am I going to do this? Can I achieve this? And some nights you do and some nights you don't, frankly. That's the other thing. You capture something on film it's wonderful. You capture something unique because it never goes away. But if you capture it in the theater on one night, you can't try and repeat it the next night. You have to somehow live it the next night. It's like trying to open a trick door, and every night they change where the lock is. It's not the same with the group. It's I don't know. It's the only way I can describe it, really.
Have you ever done Cyrano de Bergerac?
I have done Cyrano
I was
de
just thinking
Bergerac.
you'd be perfect for that.
Yeah,
role.
I have
It's like
done
one of my
Cyrano.
favorite plays.
Yeah, it is. It's a great one. Cyrano, they say, is the character actor's Hamlet. Because I never got. I played Claudius, but I never got a chance to play Hamlet. I did Mercutio. Like in Romeo and Juliet, I wouldn't get to play Romeo, thank God. I didn't really want to play Romeo, to be honest with you, but I got to play Mercutio. What a great role, twice. And
Did you get to play Cyrano as Cyrano, or did you?
Cyrano,
You
yeah,
got
I
to
got
play
to play
Cyrano?
Cyrano. Yeah. Matter of fact, the cast gave me my nose. They gave me my nose. And it was a wonderful experience, I have to say. Really challenging and
I'm a big
Beautiful.
fan of the old movie from the 50s.
Jose Ferrer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like, what's his name?
The black and white one.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, but I like Depardieu too, the French one. It's very good. Yeah. These are, the interesting thing about these plays and these roles, like, okay, I'm trying to think, Leontes, who's the jealous husband in Winter's Tale, who's just like crazy until he sees a light. Iago, Mercutio, many of these roles I've done a couple of times. People say, well, why do you do it again? I say, well, because I'm 15 years older now. I've 15 years of experience of life. I'm not talking about on the stage, just life. And I always say, the audience can read the play at home. You can read Cyrano, you can read Hamlet, you can read As You Like It at home. The text never changes. The reason you go to the theater is to hear the subtext of the actors and the creation of the designers and director to present this in a way. For instance, Taming of the Shrew can be done Elizabethan England, absolutely. Or it can be done in the Wild West. Or it can be done a GI in Italy who's, right after World War II. It can be done a number of ways. And the subtext changes every time you do it. And that's why it's sort of delightful. And these plays can speak to us in so many different ways, I think at different ages. Matter of fact, classical plays, if you really look at, plays are generational. Modern plays today aren't generational. They're generally young people with young people, old people. It's not like, I guess what I'm saying is a play like The Seagull, an actor could start as Treplev, who's the young playwright Trouble. He can move on to Medvedenko, who's a bit of a bumpkin. He can move on to the writer, Trigorin. He can move on to the older sick guy, Soren, and then the landowner. So there are 5 roles that he can grow through and have a completely different. Plays today don't have that. So, I don't know, it's interesting, and sometimes I think about, oh God, I didn't understand that role. When I look back, I didn't understand. That's why I think it's hard to find a 14-year-old that can do Juliet. You really do. She can look Juliet, absolutely. As a matter of fact, she looks more Juliet than a 28-year-old, let's face it. But I'd go with the 25, 26-year-old with the experience to do because when you get to the second half of that play, that's no longer just a young girl, that is a woman. And she needs to be strong, and she needs to know what she's doing, otherwise the play just sort of goes down the drain, in my opinion. Who else? Are we almost at time? I don't want to keep you from other things. Sure.
No, I'm saying we've got time.
Oh, we got time for one more?
Yeah.
Please, yes.
You talked about your movie, TV roles, and you talked about stage. Can you talk a little bit about voice acting and what your thoughts are on mo-capture for games and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's sort of what I say, that the actor has to do a little bit of everything and teach. I love going off, sometimes I go off to the university and teach a semester of acting and act with the students, or direct or something, But I decided, oh, you know what, I should do some voice acting. So I looked around, found an agent. It was okay. My first audition was World of Warcraft. Now, I ask you, that was my first audition, you know, and you know, it's a gift that keeps giving. So I do a couple of sessions, at least a couple, if not more, every year. So it's really wonderful. Although we are on strike now, fortunately. So I have that, but then I read, what is the most lucrative moneymaker for studios and production companies? What is it? I thought it would be film and television, right? No, it's video games. So I'm thinking to myself, I better learn something about video games. So I did, and I started doing mocap, which is great fun. You know, mocap, you're in a leotard with all these marks, you know, you got little dots on your head, you got this cone. It's like a metal frame comes like this with a camera on it and some lights. And you're in this sound stage with nothing. This room is pretty bare, but if you can imagine the most ornate set, that the mocap production of that would be a cardboard box and some wooden stools. I mean, so you have to, as the actor, have to create everything. It's fabulous. I did a Call of Duty, I'm trying to think, but the most recent ones I've done are 2 Star Wars. And those are fabulous. They, you know, because I thought I could finally say from Jaffa to Jeddah. That's fabulous.
I think we have one more question.
Jedi Master Eno Cordova.
You're in trouble.
AKA.
No, I'm Tony. I'm not.
Likely story.
Amendola. You were wanted by the Empire.
I figured.
To become an honorary member of the 501st.
Oh, get out. Oh, you guys are so great.
For your contributions to the Star Wars universe.
Thank you. That is so wonderful. So I can get a picture of this. Although, wait a minute. Can I take a picture with you guys? I don't know. You're a good time. Thank you so much. You guys are just really, really great.
And this is also for you,
Papers you would do for your
and this is one of our Garrison 66.
Thank you. Do you think I could use this as my passport?
Can you stop a picture on there?
Thank you so much, guys. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
And,
here.
it's funny, you weren't here, but I just said, the best thing about doing the Star Wars game was to be able to say, I've gone from Jaffa to Jedi. And that's, to me, a dream. So thank you. This is just so great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As, in case you're not aware, we're an international club, so you're now part of over 20,000 members worldwide.
Okay, well, what other countries?
All of them. We've even had a trip in Antarctica.
Get out.
No, scientists were going
Okay.
down there, brought in Snowy, and dressed up in Antarctica, so.
Well, I hope I get a chance to meet them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any conventions you go to, they're there to support you.
Okay, thank you very much. This is really, really sweet. I really, really appreciate it. Whoever would have thought? In the ocean, yeah? You guys are everywhere.
Unfortunately for you.
This is like, thank God we're on neutral ground here, otherwise.
Oh, we still have our jail cell over there. so-
Oh!
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Okay.
Hold on to that. Hold on. That's
I
where
will.
the line is.
I will.
One of
Hold
the
on.
smaller Garrisons, so ours is
Everybody wants. I'd just like to announce, Tony's gonna take a little break for lunch, and he'll be back at 2 o'clock. So if you haven't gotten a photo, autograph, or both, he'll be here until 5 after that, okay? Thank you.